Hey guys, welcome back to Believe University, BU. And today I have a very special guest. I have Spencer here with me today. Spencer, can you introduce yourselves for the people?
I'm Spencer. I'm a senior here
Uh,
at the U of R studying psychology. I'm current president of Hawaii Club, Hawaii. I played football for 3 years here, and I just here to enjoy the company and the questions, and yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah. So for this episode, since he is the president of the Hawaii Club, I wanted to talk about Hawaii, right, and history and the people, because I feel like it's a topic that not most people talk about.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes. Okay.
And it's just, I would love to shed light on it. And so let's just start with, were you like born and raised in Hawaii?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. So
let's start there. And like what island? And
I was born on Oahu,
okay,
which is the main island in the sense that like 80% of the state's population lives on that one island.
okay.
So I was born 2000. I grew up there. I grew up in Hawaii Kai, which is a affluent suburb of Honolulu proper.
Okay.
It's on the southeastern side of Oahu, and I went to high school at Punahou. I went there for 13 years, so since kindergarten.
Oh,
Um, Basically, kind of my upbringing. So, because I like had grown up in an affluent area and I went to a private school, um, there's like a certain type of like exposure I had to various people. My mom had attended the school actually, and that was in like the 80s and the 70s.
okay.
So my parents had me really late in life when they're like 33.
Mhm.
And my dad actually went to Kaiser, which is the public school in Hawaii Kai. And there's kind of a, I don't know how to describe that. There's kind of a prejudice between private and public schools.
Mm.
And like if you went to a private school, you're from where I'm from, it's like looked down upon because you're like this like rich kid and you're kind of soft and like
Mm.
you're not you're not really a part of like everybody else. You're your own thing. And I went to Punahou forever, and like
13 years, man.
like that's like for sure a big part of my identity. And
Okay.
even within people from Hawaii who know stuff about it, like I still get that like I will overlook the fact that you went to Punahou to be friends with you here, even if like I don't consider it offensive or like it's coming from a bad place, but like I understand what they mean. That's just kind of like the attitude around it.
Mm.
And so I'm also Hawaiian. My mom's Filipino, Spanish, Italian. So my mom's mom, my grandma,
Mm.
um, she grew up in Hawaii, and she grew up in like a really big family.
Okay.
And so Filipinos in Hawaii are like they immigrated to work on the pineapple plantations, and a lot of them are Catholic, and so like they have these very large families, and they're very short, and they live forever. That's like kind of thing. And so
Mm.
my grandma grew up in a very big family. I actually knew most of her siblings and their like kids and their kids and stuff growing up, but she ended up meeting my grandfather who's white in San Francisco,
Mm.
and my mom was born there. She's the oldest of five. And then my mom moved to Hawaii when she was like 2. And so basically, on that side, it's kind of like that whole. Where am I going with this?
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
My mom like grew up. She went to private school, the same one that I did, and my aunties did too. And then my dad is like different in the sense that like he's Hawaiian, like he's mixed with like a bunch of other Asian, like white things, and he went to public school, and both of his parents are from Hawaii, and so growing up, like both my parents are poor. They definitely had that in common. Like my dad grew up in a house with like four other nuclear families, so it was like his mom's sister's kids and like everything and all that. And then my mom, shared a bedroom with four other girls, and that was like her like kind of life. And so my mom's mom, my grandmother, always believed that education was like the way out of poverty, and that was like a really big value for me growing up. And that's why my mom went to private school. And when her and my dad had me, they tried me out in kindergarten. I had to get in, and at first my dad was like very hesitant of it, just because he went to public school, and he was like, I don't understand why I'm going to pay $13,000 a year for this. And I ended up getting in, and my parents figured out a lot of my life, how to pay tuition, and like that just was like a big value for me. I feel like growing up and my life experiences, and even coming here, like even being in college, like going to Punahou was so influential. Like it taught me everything, not everything, but it prepped me a lot for college, and it's a big part of my identity, even within being from Hawaii and being Hawaiian within itself.
Yeah. What's like the process like to get into these private schools? Because I know you said that you had to be like a specific.
Okay, so like private schools in Hawaii, there's like a big. I know a bunch of random facts. So random fact number one, I think Hawaii has the highest amount of private schools per capita in the U.S. Like, it's for your fun fact. Fridays,
I had no idea.
So there's actually a lot, and there's a big because Hawaii's public school system is run only it's run through state funding. So typically, like how I understand it is most schools, like the taxes from the houses in that area pay for it, right? So like if your housing costs more, you have higher incomes in the area, like there's more funding for like the public schools.
Yep.
And in Hawaii, like it's state run, so the funding for all the public schools are divided up basically, I think, based on how many people go to your school or whatnot, but it's kind of split more evenly. Okay. So like just because I grew up in like a more affluent area doesn't mean that like Kaiser, which was the public school over there, gets more funding than Kohuku does, which is on the North Shore and like the countryside over there. Okay. Very pretty, very pretty. Yeah. And so basically all the public schools are just underfunded. Okay. And so like there's I don't know how it is in most places, but there's like a sense of like for some people it's going to private school because like you just have access to more resources is really what you're kind of paying for. And realizing that like for me, like my brother went to public school for a while, and one of the reasons why he kind of had to go into private school is because he has ADD and dysgraphia, which is like dyslexia, but it's with writing instead of reading. And there's not enough resources in like a classroom of like 30 kids for a teacher to help my brother learn stuff and get through school. And like for me, like when I was going through my own challenges at Punahou, like they had a school psychologist that brings you in and tests you and like gives you certain accommodations and like helps you out, and like you're struggling with classes and you talk to your teachers are like, okay, like you can turn this in late, like we're gonna help you with this. Like they really try to get you to graduation instead of like the crash and burn, which is like even if we would like to help you, we can't. And so that's kind of like the push for stuff like that like that's why like for me and my family, like they thought it was important for me. And so Punahou's like really hard to explain sometimes because I've never had to explain certain things before. Like it was just understood. And so, like, the reason why I feel like it was so influential for me is because it's this college prep school, and you pay a lot of money to go. Like, tuition now is close to 30 grand a year. Pay a lot of money to
Sheesh.
go. But it's like, I can only think of specific examples to try and make my point. It's like you have experiences there, like, okay, so we have this Punahou Carnival, and it's like, it used to be, COVID like really hurt it, but it used to be the largest high school run carnival in the country. Random fact number 2. And so the thing with Punahou is the tuition's expensive, but every kid is only paying 80% of what it costs to educate them. So every kid gets basically a 20% discount. And a lot of that's funded through this like really like big, 2-day carnival. So it goes from like 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Okay. Friday and Saturday, usually Super Bowl weekend, but now it's the week before Super Bowl. And it's like carnival rides and games and stuff, and like food booths and just like stuff, and like all of that except for the rides is basically student led. So the junior class is in charge of running the carnival every year. And they pick a theme and they do booths, and they like, it's very organized. But the reason why it's so important is because like part of it is for sure like the alumni base is like, there's a lot of alumni who come back and like they're pretty well off, and so like that's part of the reason why they pull in so much. But like in 2 days they make like $2 to $4 million. Like, it's like ridiculous. Like, it's, if you don't know about it, like, you just have to go and like experience it. Like, it's just crazy. Dang. It's really crazy. Okay. And like,
I had no idea. Okay, that's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So experiences like that, like being a junior, right? You're like, there's a lot of parent involvement and stuff, but there's this whole communal effort to raise funds and to like run this event. Is a lot to organize. Yeah. And I remember being a junior, like, I actually didn't want to be a booth leader. It's like too much work, but my parents ironically were, and so I ended up like, you have to work like a certain amount of shifts, freshmen through juniors, and so I ended up working like way more shifts than I was supposed to because I was helping out my parents with it's like food service. So it's like our school cafeteria cooks a lot of the food in the booths that people buy, and like the amount of prep work for that is like insane. It's like, I mean, thinking about cooking for thousands of people, and like stuff like, my dad was like, the food inspector comes in like the day of or 2 days before, and you just see him go like, this whole stack of like food, like chicken, I don't know what they have, and he's like, this temperature is not good, and they just like toss it. Like there's like so many behind the scenes things that you have to do to coordinate that and to work with that. And this ties in perfectly to ASA Night Market, which we did have basically Hawaii Club and the Asian Student Association. We had a large event to display culture and the differences between Asian and Pacific Islander cultures. And we had food, like traditional food. It was basically completely student led by Dylan Che, who, shout out to him, because it is hard to do something like that. And it was nowhere near the scale of like the carnival, but the point I'm trying to make is to have an experience like that like really helps me know how to like organize things, how to be in charge, like what it takes to do all that type of work. Like, going to Punahou, there's a lot of experiences like that where the standard I've started to see is like higher than what most people have. And so my idea of like what's good enough is typically above like expectations of what other people think. And so like being in that environment for so long, and why my like that peer environment of like the standard for us, for example, was you go to a 4-year college. We had 98% of kids in my class attend a 4-year, and 99% go away, like go to college. Out of state must have been, Hawaii really has University of Hawaii and Hawaii Pacific University, and there was a few kids who went to UH, maybe like 10% actually, maybe a little under, but like 80, 85%, like the good majority go to like 4 years out of state, and some go to community colleges and transfer in.
Yeah.
But like that expectation always was like I was gonna go away to college in a 4-year. Like there wasn't like it almost wasn't a choice. It was just like it is what it is. Like this is what we all do. Well, that type of like pure environment, for that to be the standard, like it makes you wanna do those things. Like you don't want to be the only kid who's like taking a gap year. No. And like there's not anything wrong with that, the kids who chose to do that, but like you have that peer pressure almost in a positive sense. But that's what you're paying for. That's what you're cultivating, is the environment. It's the resources. It's these like crazy experiences that like people don't just do that. Like I didn't know people don't do that with their experience. Like,
yeah, no.
we just do stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it's a healthy competition is definitely needed, you know? I didn't know, like, because when you're saying that, like, I just can, like, I really resonated with what you're saying, because my parents value education, and, like, they're immigrants as well. And so, like, I just didn't know that there was a huge immigration, like, immigrant population in Hawaii. I had no idea. And then also, like, if you want to talk about that a little bit, and also like the difference, you know how you just said like ASA market night, you were trying to highlight the difference between Asian culture and Pacific Islander. So yeah.
So immigration. All right, little Hawaii history that I know of. I definitely don't know everything. Okay, Hawaii, Captain Cook, which is basically like Christopher Columbus for us, comes in 1778. At first, they think he's a god. I don't want to say it because I might be wrong. But basically, a certain time of year, it was the time of year that he came. That made him think he was like the human form of a god. And so he comes back at a different time of year, and they realize like he's not. And really don't know the specifics, but there's some type of skirmish, and like he gets killed. But from him, like he calls it the Sandwich Isles, and European explorers like start sailing to Hawaii, right? It was discovered by the West then. And from that, there was a lot of change. There was King Kamehameha, who was the first king that united the islands. And that's big because each island used to have its own chief that was like in charge of like that specific island. And fun fact number 3 is Kauai, which is one of the older islands, didn't ever go to war with King Kamehameha. They just submitted to him and said, we don't want to fight you because you've killed a bunch of people on these other islands that have tried to fight you from this unity. So we are going to allow you to basically take charge and unite us. But that's still a pride point to this day for people from Kauai, because they weren't officially conquered by King Kamehameha. So he does that, and he's really influential. Even his son, I think King Kamehameha II, like stuff like, it was kapu, which is something that like you can't do. It's like taboo for people to, like men and women had to eat separately.
Mm.
And I think it was King Kamehameha II, if I remember correctly, who like broke that kapu for the first time. And so there's like a lot of changes that happened, kind of after that. Captain Cook, like, it's like, we're not the only ones here. Like, that would be completely life changing, right?
Mm.
And um, Hawaii used to actually be its own independent country, right? So the Hawaiian flag is modeled after the British flag because that used to be our closest allies, and so um, a lot of the history during that time period, which is obviously well documented once people started to learn to read and write, because before that, history was documented only orally, but it was amazing, like the amount that people could remember without writing anything down. Like, there's still some people today that know their entire genealogy orally, like back to like the gods creating you, like every generation down. Which, I mean,
Orally?
yes,
That's
orally.
crazy.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, like, kind of the short thing is basically Hawaii ended up becoming its own country, very close ties with Britain.
Okay.
And in 1893, there was the illegal overthrow of the kingdom. And at the time, like one of the other fun fact number fours is that Hawaii was, I'm not sure in the world, but it was one of the first like places, Iolani Palace, which is where the kings and queens and stuff reside, had electricity in like the 1800s, which was like pretty advanced technologically, for its time. And that's a lot of like where the country was at in its own sovereignty and its own respect, like functioning in the world. And basically, I know it's McKinley, but there was a president before. I don't know if it's Roosevelt or not, but they had met with one of the was it Queen? Or was it Princess? They had met with one of the monarchs in Hawaii, and they told them, like, the U.S. was thinking about basically just occupying Hawaii at that point. They were in there, and I started to figure this out, but in that time period, they were in their very like imperialistic like ideas of the West trying to save everybody and taking people over. This was around the same time they did that to the Philippines. They did the same thing in Panama, like when they were trying to build the Panama Canal, and like white people trying to save everyone. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they had met with the president and was like, we're our own country, like we don't want that, like X, Y, Z, and A. And the president was kind of like trying to talk to Congress and stuff and be like, okay, like I can honor that. Then McKinley gets elected like right after though, very soon after, and McKinley basically doesn't care, and that's when they decide to overthrow the kingdom, and they imprisoned the queen. The U.S. imprisons the queen in her castle. People are really, really upset, and I think I really need Google right now. But
we got Google right here.
I'm like, what happens is the queen gives she writes this letter.
Okay.
And in this letter, she talks about not wanting any bloodshed with her people. And they, I mean, in her imprisonment and her like basically at gunpoint, like kind of submits and is like, okay, we will be a part of the US. And the history, like, there's a lot of argument in the officialness of that and the it's controversial in the sense that there's technically no treaty of annexation between Hawaii and the United States. And so, under international court of law, the argument for sovereignty that I believe is brought up in international court is that because there's no treaty, the U.S. still illegally occupies Hawaii.
Still to this day.
Yeah, still, and which is like, as you can see that because there's the Newfoundland resolution, but it's not a treaty, and so that's like that basis core argument for like a lot of the sovereignty. Besides the fact that like people want to govern themselves and people, don't like a lot of the Western ideas, and there's even a sense of going back to how Hawaii was run was there would be ahu pua'as, and these were areas of land divided up from the mountain to the sea, and it follows the path of water. It rains and then it trickles all the way down into the ocean and such, and all their food and basically community kind of revolved around people doing things in this ahu pua'a, where you have like farmers and people that grew kalo, which is like taro, and people that fish and like there's specialties within that. And it's incredibly intelligent. Like it's environmentally really conscious. It like the path of water, like they have things that are like certain things are located where they are based on like what makes the most sense for the community, how you'd feed the most people. Like it's just very well thought out. It's very well thought out at this point. And there's even talk of returning to that type of system within like the ideas of fighting for sovereignty. And I think it's just so interesting because it's obviously extremely controversial, and even the fact that saying like Hawaii is a state is like super controversial. I mean, like to people's core, like someone who just died said this, but she was talking about in a speech, we will not ever be Americans. We will die as Hawaiians. And people really like that's almost like so hard to like explain and think about, but like they're not American. Like if you told them they're American, like people pissed. Like there's now no identity in that. And even like for myself, like as much as like sovereignty's controversies and like there isn't really even agreement about how it would all work, how the government would work, who would get land, like there's not. It's an idea and it's a strong idea. There's not even agreement amongst that. There's the idea that like yeah, like I wouldn't say I'm a Hawaiian nationalist because I feel like that comes with a lot more, than what people think about. But I also like don't identify as American either. Like I don't know how to explain it. Like I don't even really feel like I belong to a country. Like I don't have any sense of nationalism, and that definitely like the nationalism and patriotism that people have had openly in California for me was like very culture shock because I had never like prior in my experiences had like coaches who like are very American and believe in these like patriotic ideals that for much of my life was like very much not. And I'm still the kid in like econ class talking about how certain things like capitalism is like a completely Western ideal. Like, like I'm that kid, but I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I've never given that much thought into my identity until I've had to, because people have labeled me as something that I was like even when I go back now, like I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of people from Hawaii who's just like not Hawaiian enough, like Hawaii Kai, Punahou, like I'm not. I'm maybe an eighth, a quarter at most. Like I don't speak any of it.
Mm-hmm.
I know the history a little bit, but like obviously, I'm no historian in it. Like just not Hawaiian enough. Just whitewash, and it's like that in itself, honestly, is very divisive, because
Yep.
now we start to tell people who have blood, it's like, but you're not like us. Like there's no unity in that
Yep.
community,
Yeah.
and that's the truth. Like that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Like even my other friends, like I have a lot of friends who are like half and they speak it and they definitely know way more. And like they've been eye opening for me, and like understanding like where I come from and how I view things. But like, there's a lot of division and a lot of prejudice, and it's not easy. Like anything,
Yeah.
it's really not easy.
And is that why? Like, because I think I remember when we had that talk in
CDI.
Yeah, in CDI. And you were like, you mentioned how like the importance of keeping what was it exactly? It was like blood.
Oh, you were talking about, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
you
yes.
know what I'm
Okay,
talking about?
I
What was
know
it?
exactly what you. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking about Hawaiian Homelands.
Oh, there you go.
Homestead. Basically, yeah, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, DHHL,
Okay.
is this good government funded, I believe, through the state, and there's these plots of land designated on various islands for Hawaiian people only. And so how it works is you get this plot of land. It's $1 a year for 99 years. And you only get it if you're at least half Hawaiian. And your kids only get it if they're at least a quarter Hawaiian. So you can't just keep passing it down if you don't have enough Hawaiian in you. You can't even get on the list.
Mm.
And kind of some of that is, I think, the appeasement and the acknowledgement that like what America did is just like it's messed up, and you reap what you sow, and like for a lot of people, like the blood's not good. And so because of that, stealing of Hawaii,
Yeah, literally.
there's like people, Hawaiians want something in return. And so this started in like 1920, 21. So actually the first people who got it just now had to like give it back or pass it on to someone else. But you get this land, you build your house on it, like from scratch kind, and people, there's these communities. And, there's a lot of ideas, because going back to the history with the plantation days and, besides the genocide and Hawaiians like dying off, mostly in disease, largely. But people intermix a lot in Hawaii. So, fun fact number 5, Hawaii's never had a majority ethnicity or race ever. Like, literally ever. And it has the highest percentage of people who identify as 2 or more races, like by a mile. Like, the state, as a state, it's like 24 or 25%. So, people are like just very, very mixed. And so, there's a lot of, from the plantation days when colonizers came, and they called them the Big Five. They basically owned like all of the businesses and stuff in Hawaii, shipping, farming, all that. And they brought in people from all over the world, like Puerto Rico, Portugal, Russia, all over Asia, Samoa, like everywhere, and they all met on these plantations where no one spoke. No one came from the same culture. No one spoke the same. Like people had to figure out how to coexist from like opposite ends of the world, and that's where pidgin comes from. Is it's a language mixed with a bunch of other languages that people speak in Hawaii, and that's how they learned to communicate. And because everyone also was on the plantations together, like there was a lot of intermixing of like people having kids, and so like there's a lot of people who like even if they're just Asian, they're like Chinese and Japanese, you know. But typically, it's like people who can be like any type of white mixing with Asian, mixing with like Hawaiian and stuff like that. So that's like super common, and like from that history, there's just less people who are 50% Hawaiian and really Hawaiian in general. And so that like because the blood quantum, and it goes back to the whole idea like you're not Hawaiian enough. You're not enough. But because of that, like there's also some sense of like people who want to have kids with Hawaiians or who want to like keep the bloodline strong. You want to only have kids with someone else that's Hawaiian, so you can get homestead. And, you get stuff like that. You also can go to Kamehameha, which is a school. I believe it says it's made for the people of Hawaii, but if you look at the website for Kamehameha, it says there's a preference for applicants from Hawaiian ancestry. And basically, if you're not Hawaiian, you don't go to Kamehameha. Like you have to be Hawaiian. Like it's a really well funded private school, in the sense that like their endowment came from Princess Bernice Pauahi Bishop, who gave a lot to education, but their endowment's in the billions because she still has a lot of land in the state that Kamehameha owns. And they're a well funded private school, and the campus is beautiful actually. You ever go, it's like on a hill, and I mean like there it's so pretty. It's big, so it's hard to walk around because it's really tired, but like it's so pretty. And it is a good private school, and it's way cheaper than Punahou's 30 grand a year. It's like 5 grand a year, and most of the kids like aren't even paying that. They just gets it covered. And it's like stuff like free food at the cafeteria. It's like free, and it's all you can eat, and like it's like really
It's just really fun.
Yeah, like I mean, like if you can't afford private school, and then like you're maybe you don't want your kids to go to public school or whatnot. Like if you're Hawaiian, like solid, very great option, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like because of like stuff like that, there's the idea that like you want to be Hawaiian, but then like I said, like me going to school like Pono, which was founded by missionaries who were white, so it's like and then it's like not being Hawaiian enough. There's that whole ideal, and then the reasons why people want to be it, and it that in itself is like divisive, but it kind of explains the diversity in Hawaii itself,
Yeah, I didn't know it was that diverse, but
it was like that.
No, and it makes sense. Literally, like the history and everything. Okay, but could you please help me with the difference in cultures, right, between Asian culture and the Pacific Islander?
Okay. So labeling. So yeah, it's me. All right. Basically, go ahead. AAPI, like to me, is like just the most whitewashed version of trying to group people, because like no one like in any capacity can group Asians and Pacific Islanders together. Like it's different, not even like the best way I can like try and describe it is like you just group Black and like Latinx people together.
Because they,
Yeah,
like they
it's-
struggle,
yeah.
but like,
It's like everyone that's not white, we're just gonna throw you in
oh,
this.
that's so terrible.
Like it's just it's not the same. It's
Mhm.
not the same. And like I consider myself like Polynesian because Hawaii is part of Polynesia,
Mhm.
which of course is like problematic in itself, and people trying to tell you like what area you're from, but like never have I ever been like I'm Pacific Island.
Okay,
Like, you know
that's
what I
what
mean?
I say. I would say,
Yeah.
would Polynesian be better than?
Yeah, like I would be like if I'm not Hawaiian, like I'm a subset of Poly
Okay.
or Polynesian. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
anyway, besides that label,
And then you want to let's talk about
Yeah.
why Chick-fil-A has a Polynesian sauce.
There's a lot of things that like there are certain things that like this might sound bad, but like there are certain things that I'm like I've had to be more like, am I gonna be upset about this? And then more understanding for people who like they don't know a lot of like the differences. Like like spam's not traditional Hawaiian food. Neither is rice actually at all. Rice is from Asia, but thank God because I love rice. Okay. But like people who just don't know a lot about like Chick-fil-A has the Polynesian sauce, but one of the like I feel like for me the number one things is like it is totally cultural appropriation to dress up in a grass skirt and a coconut bra and then to attempt to dance hula. Like it's like that's a bigger issue for me. Like, it sounds bad, but I'm kind of trying to pick and choose. Like it's such a problem. Like you can't.
I have no idea. Oh my god.
Disneyland has this what's that around the world ride? It's like God.
I have never been to Disneyland. I've been to Disney World. So
Disneyland anyway has one of those rides, and under Pacific Islander, it starts to talk about Filipinos being grouped in that category with Hawaiians and stuff, and I'm like, you can't have information like that out there because it's not like true. like first of all,
oh my god,
like there's like let's go back to hula. So it's the heartbeat of the Hawaiian culture. It's the way stories are told and things are passed down, and it's deeper than dance. I feel like, and you can't just do it. Like you can't just do it. You can't just make stuff up. You don't get to like choreograph your own. Like someone like a kumu or a teacher has to like teach you the choreographed dance. You don't just get to make up hand motions. It's really not about shaking your ass. Like it's none of that. Like it's so sacred. Like almost like the Bible for Christians. Like it's like it's a big deal. Wow. And it's like I've danced it before, but it's really difficult. It's really detail oriented, and obviously like there's a big hula competition in Hawaii, and like I would say it's a sport actually. Like it's one of those things. Like it's a big deal. It's very serious, and for people to just like traditional wear is not grass skirts. So for people to like go and dress up as like what they think the culture is, and then try and do something like that sacred to Hawaiians is like it's so problematic. Like if you weren't taught by Kumu how to dance hula, you don't get to do it. Like you don't get to do it. And you don't just get to wear traditional wear either. Like no one wears coconut bras. Like people actually wear topless. Like that was the thing. Like it's cool. But like it's a problem in the sense that like not enough people know. They don't know about that. They don't know. Like even at Redlands. Yeah. Like even at Redlands, like you have parties and you have events and stuff that are themed for like tourists. Like someone was telling me they would have tourist day and in Spirit Week at school, and people would come in like hula skirts and stuff. And I'm like, look, guys, like, you can't do that. It's really problematic. Like, you wouldn't have
That's actually kind of
Like,
crazy because
yeah.
now that you're saying that,
Yeah.
because now that I'm thinking about like Spirit Week in like high school, I definitely remember with the like or like the floral print like shirt or like
the camera.
the camera.
Like,
oh my god, that's so
like,
bad.
Like, yeah, I.
But where does that come from?
I
Like,
know. I can't. I can't. Like, you can't do stuff like that. Like, it's not like it. I don't even know how to draw a comparison. It's like people dressing up and for like Asian cultures, like traditional Asian wear, and they like would like kimonos. Wear it on. Yeah, like you can't wear a kimono like a certain way. Like it's cultural appropriation. Like, just don't get to do stuff like that. Yeah. But I feel like for Hawaiian culture specifically, because there's such a lack of info and representation on it, most people just have no idea. Yeah. Like in any capacity, like they wouldn't know the first thing about Hawaii, other than it's like the 50th state or anything.
Yeah, no, that's literally all I knew. I knew it was the last state to like be considered a state, and about Pearl Harbor. That's literally all I knew. And then last semester in one of my classes, my professor was like, "Yeah, Hawaii had its own kingdom. They ran them." I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, this sounds about right." White, people.
No, and like I get it in the sense that like I don't know everything about California history or Texas or like every little thing that happened, but like the fact that like even in general, U.S. imperialism is not talked about in history is just it's ridiculous. Like you guys, like you have to know, especially if you're gonna be an American, like you don't just get to like roll over the like controversial or like bad things that the country may have done. Like no one besides slavery, like no one talks about like even before that, like the genocide and the amount of like things that were taking place and just like how problematic it was that they basically used religion to justify why the US needed to continually expand and take over. And it's like this country was founded on treason of the British. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. Anyway.
No, you're so right. You're so right. And like what I'm hearing is that I'm like relating it to like native culture. Yeah. And like it sounds very similar in the sense that you guys were like governing yourself. Yeah, and similar experiences and like the chief. So when you said that, I was like, okay, so it's kind of similar in that sense. Do you like kind of
in that sense? Like it's like you go through, and I feel like everyone goes. That's not white. Kind of has that like experience of like we understand that like you don't look like the majority race, right? And like there's definite similarities, and I feel like the only thing with that is when you group us with native students, like in general, you forget that like that takes away part of our identity too, because we're not Asian, we're not Native American. Like being Hawaiian is like it's its own thing, and part of that is like just the lack of people that are Hawaiian and know the history and can talk about it. It's like even at this school, sorry, Redlands, but also like it's not Redlands' fault because like outside of the state, I get it. There's not that many people, but like not a ton of people to be like, hey, we're our own thing and we need to have our own thing. Yeah. It's like we can't be grouped with Native student programs and we can't be grouped with like Asian and we can't go with the AAPI label. Like you guys need to have a place, and even beyond Hawaiians, like Polynesians in general. I get there's not a lot of us, but you can't just throw us in with other groups and be like, well, it's like, oh, I don't know. There's like two of you on campus, so sorry, like we don't like just get anywhere else. And so honestly, that's part of why I even wanted to bring back the club is like there needs to be some type of place of belonging and identity and presence that's it's not super uncommon. Like there's all tons of other small private schools in even this part of the country that have prominent Hawaii clubs where it's like there's at least something else for you to belong to, instead of being A, grouped with people that really you don't identify with, because, like, personally, don't identify with any one of that, or B, by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the most isolating experience on a continent, you know?
Yeah. And do you think the reason why like most people don't know or like are ignorant to the culture is because like the lack of like media representation? Do you want to like speak on that a little
Yeah,
bit?
I feel like, and like, this is where, like, I've, you know, had a lot of compassion, because I'm, like, trying to understand, like, things are the way they are, and, like, it's hard for me to blame people because I have my own ignorance and prejudice. Like, I don't understand everything either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I fully get that, like, it's hard to be represented when, there's not many people to represent you.
Okay.
Like that, it makes sense to me. But even, like, movies filmed in Hawaii about Hawaiian people, or just, like, in the area, like, filmed there, and you're trying to talk about the culture, and you don't have anyone from Hawaii or anyone that's even, like, Polynesian in the movie. Like, it's almost, is it better to not be represented at all than to be misrepresented, right? There's, like, can't have it both ways. I get it. And in an ideal world, you wouldn't have to pick. But it's like, you can't, like, you would just, like, you would have someone that's not black playing a black person in a movie.
Yeah.
Like,
It's terrible.
you just get to do stuff like that. And so it's hard, because it definitely contributes to the fact that, like, there's no representation. Like, the only Polynesian person I can think of is The Rock.
No, literally the only one.
Like, and then
That's it.
like, yeah, and then I guess Moana. You have Ali
Okay.
Carvalho. Like, one person, but like there's not enough of us out there, and a large part of that is colonization and
Yep.
history, and people not having the resources, the access
Yep.
to stuff to go and act for Disney, or even
Yep.
run for office, or the government itself in Hawaii. Like, there's a lot of Asian people, but there's not enough Hawaiians in government, and part of that is the fact they don't want to be part of America. But access to stuff like that, like, it's it's hard, because, like, it's hard to undo things that have been done for so long, and to, like, all of that history. Like, I get it, and I think a lot about it, and it's like, it's hard for people, because there's this talk, is that, like, it's not my, or, like, anyone's job to educate people on Hawaiian culture and history. And so, like,
Very true.
I understand that point, but, like, for me, it's hard in the sense that, like, if no one does anything, how can we expect anything to change either?
Yep.
And so, like, there's, like, all of that. I get it, but I can't sit here and be like, I don't like X, Y, Z, and A, and it needs to be fixed, and Brethren is doing, and then go like, yeah, but I won't do anything. I think I'm cool. Like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
I can't. I just, for me, it's like, I can't have my cake and then eat it too. Like, look, there has to be some type of change, because, like, I agree it shouldn't be the way it is, but it can't just. It's not just gonna happen.
Yeah. The nair. Yeah. Gotta put in the work a little bit. Like, that's a great point, because like I always hear people say that about like Black like history, and like we shouldn't be the ones educating and da da da. But then at the end of the day, then we're just gonna be stuck at this place forever.
Yeah, like it may not be our job, but I don't know who else is, like, doing it. Like, and even, like, it's this thing too, is you Google stuff and you get information, and there's not always accurate information. True. It's like, where where is their change?
It's true.
You know,
True.
like obviously it has to come from the oppressors too. We can't be mad at oppressed people for being oppressed, but it's like,
Yeah.
where do we like? For me, like, can't really just be a bystander.
Yeah.
Can't just be a bystander. It's like, okay, let's go do something about it and talk about it, and like, I don't like it, you know.
Yeah. What is your favorite like Hawaiian like food dish?
My food.
Yeah.
Has to be poke.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
Which is like also
Let's
total
hear.
tangent.
Yeah.
Like the bowls that they have with like, you get like the carrots and the like that's not poke. That's pokey. That's not poke bowls. Like
Oh.
traditionally, like it's just fish and basically like salt and other things that we're used to garnish the dish. And in Hawaii culture, not Hawaiian culture, it's become more like rice and fish. But the whole like carrot edamame, like guys,
Yeah.
it's not what it is, and it's usually cubed. So like if it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like grated fish. You know what I mean? Like typically not that traditional
Mm.
either. But yes, it's got to be my favorite, and I like it more in the Hawaii sense because Hawaii culture and Hawaiian culture are different, right? There's like Hawaii culture, which is a mix of Hawaiian influences, but also a lot of the Asian influences and like all those cultures that came from the plantation. And then there's like traditional Hawaiian culture.
Mm.
And so like traditionally, it's good as it is without all the like eel sauce and stuff added afterwards. But my favorite is like Hawaii style where they add like sriracha
Mm.
and like shoyu, which is like soy sauce and like all that stuff. It's really good.
It's good.
But also Haupia's fire too. Haupia's so good. Traditional like Hawaiian stuff.
Is that fire? Yeah.
Okay.
Might make me hungry.
I know.
Haven't ate yet.
I'm like, and it's such a struggle too because like you can't find traditional Hawaii or like Hawaiian places like anywhere within like an hour of Redlands. Like
Wow.
you're just like going to like the coast to get like a glimpse of it, and then it's like when I go home, like there's always there's so many.
Spot everywhere.
It's so good, and it's like this is good enough for here, but like it's never the same.
So, how do you feel about like tourists visiting
Okay.
Hawaii?
Okay. So I'm so controversial. Yeah.
Say it.
I'm not gonna get support. I mean, some people are gonna hear this and they're gonna, it's just the whitewash kid. For me, it's about doing it respectfully, and for a lot of people, it's like shouldn't even exist because it's the act of colonization. So it's just like another thing on top. But oh my god, it's okay. I'll talk about the problematic stuff first. So it's like people coming, and I have a lot more compassion, especially because like I'm dating, a black girl who's from California and Vegas. She's basically not from there.
Yeah.
So I have a lot more compassion, but it's like a lot of people coming and not understanding the culture, which is like I can get to a certain point, but they're not respecting it.
Mm.
Like stuff like customs, like things. One like very prime examples is like people not knowing that you can't touch sea turtles or monk seals or like stuff like that, and just like not respecting like rules like that. And I think, yeah, I'm controversial. Like, there's almost a sense of like tourists coming and like just thinking people can do like whatever they want and they're entitled and they're paying for vacation, and it's like you can't like I totally agree. Like you can't come to a place and just like do what you want. Like you have to like follow the policies that exist there. And so like it's very Hawaii is very community oriented in the sense that like people understand for the most part that it's bigger than them. And like in my perspective, like I feel like it's just a little more individualistic on the continent. It's just me.
Okay.
And there's like sense of like it's like the small stuff that people think about. Like you don't go to the beach and just leave your trash, or like leave your things everywhere, or you don't like people going to places that are like marked as like kapu. It's like taboo. Like you're not supposed to go to. People hiking places they don't know where to go, or if someone told them no, and they're like, I'm just gonna go do this anyway, and then having to get saved, and it's like people like not following rules, not caring, like doing things because they want to do them, and like I feel like my biggest thing I would tell anyone is that like you gotta understand you don't just get to do what you want to do, like you just don't, like you have to respect the people, and like you have to respect Hawaii itself to come and visit. But like, do I have a problem with people doing that and coming to visit? No.
Okay.
And no, in the sense that like, yes, I have like a ton of friends that like I've brought home, controversial within self, and yeah, that I brought home. But for me, it's like it's a chance for them to understand where I'm coming from and why I am the way I am, and why like I say what I say, and like things are the way it is, and like for them to like get out of their own space and like be they experience something totally new. I mean, like I've had a couple people that have gone there. Like one had never been on a plane before, and one like had, but like had never been to Hawaii. It was like the first time flying by himself, and it's like you don't. And I feel like this is true for a lot of people. Like you can't even understand me like if you haven't come. Like you just there's no separating Hawaii from me. Like that's so ingrained in my identity, and like only strengthened by being in California. Like
I love that.
Like my identity is only like grown exponentially about being Hawaiian once I was out of a place where I felt like I belonged. And like for a lot of people who haven't been there, like I'm gonna be saying stuff and doing things, and it's like doesn't make sense. But like I think and I act and I am the way I am because of my upbringing there. And so for me, like it's a lot more, and to like educate and expose people to like this is what things are, like why who is problematic, like just all the stuff people are like, oh, like I get it now, like I see it, it makes more sense, and like for them to, it's like I feel like there's a bigger purpose to it, and and like personally, like really, I'm not for the isolationism, and like let's just close it down and no tourists, and we want no one there, and it's just like it's a give and take, guys. Like you can't just shut it off. Like, and I know it's like it's the kid in California talking about it. Like, of course, like, but
it's bigger than that.
Yeah, but like, it can't just exist in the state in an island like where we don't want tourists, we don't want people visiting, we don't want people coming. Like there's a lot of isolation. I feel like in the Hawaiian community that like I just can't get behind. Like I agree, people got to do things respectfully, but like no, like I don't have necessarily a problem with tourists coming, and like I understand like the colonization and like the history, and like people being like, okay, well, it's not treating Hawaiians fair enough, and then but it's also stuff like I mean during COVID, like it really exposed that like without tourism.
Yep.
Right? You have like, fun fact number 6, Hawaii having the highest unemployment rate in the country, and certain places having like the highest. It was like a third, like 33, 34% of people just like out of jobs, like just the entire industry gone, right? And it like affecting people so much, and like really, who does that affect? The people who can't afford it, the people who can't afford to not have a job like that, for their sector, like everything in it to be gone, and then people being like, can't pay my bills, there's not a lot of opportunity here, I'm gonna move. Like, it's not, and like, I get this is like it's so problematic, but it's really not the foreigners and like the rich people and the people who can afford it, people who are typically like the white and certain types of Asian, like Japanese, who can afford to like withstand that. It's a lot of like Hawaiians and the people who can't afford to not have jobs for 4 months were like, let's just move to Vegas, you know? And that's what makes like some topic like tourism so hard, because for as much damage as it does, like in its current state, which this is also what people want, sovereignty and such, but in its current state, like without it, like it's really the poor who get hurt the most, and a lot of it is Hawaiians who get hurt the most, in the sense that like there's no funding for Department of Education and schooling, because there's no taxes that the tourism industry brings in, so we can't afford to do stuff like it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, like, yeah, I know, I'm so, oh my god.
That's okay.
Like, it's like, I get it, like, it can be super damaging to the culture and like a lot of other things, but it's like, that's what sucks about it. Like, you have things that are in place that aren't just super cut and dry, like this is good, this is bad, and it's like, well, there's like this other side, and like it's so hard to balance. And like how do you find solutions to that? Like, I've always like struggled with that, like understanding the like economic and like that whole side of it, but trying to understand like the cultural aspect and like how you fix it. Like, I like personally, like, I really don't think Hawaiian cultural values like align at all with capitalistic and like these economic westernized values itself. Like, I just, I mean, the whole viewpoint of like capitalism being, you have to work and you have to earn, you know, you have to earn your right to do things. Like, you don't just get to own a house and own land. Like, you have to work and pay your bills, and like, if not, get evicted and go to jail if you don't pay taxes. Like, you have to work for things, and then Hawaiian culture being more like, this is our land, like like we like literally came from it. Like, our ancestors, like, we're so attached. It's not even like land ownership is just so foreign. Like, it's just this kind of communal idea that like we all take care of it and it's all ours and we don't own it, and like it belongs to us. We have a right to it. But that's not compatible with like the idea that competition in itself, like, absolutely most people, if you're like, we're gonna have a house in Hawaii, like, pretty popular. People want that. But then you bring in this idea that there's like competition, and you have to compete and like earn, like, okay, well, I want that house too, so how are we supposed to choose who gets it and who not? Like, I'm gonna out compete you for it. And like, it's not compatible with like, I'm Hawaiian, this is my ancestral land, like, this is belonging to us. Like, you don't just get to come in and like compete to whoever can afford it, it doesn't mix well.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
So this is my last question. Is there any like misconceptions you want to clear up, or like any last remarks that you want to add that I didn't ask?
Misconceptions.
Yeah.
Try to think.
Yeah, no.
Try to think. I don't know. 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 I I feel like one of the only things like I touched on a little bit, but like there's just like the difference between Hawaiian culture and like obviously there's like a laundry list of things, but just the fact that like there's a difference. Like, oh, perfect. People who are from Hawaii are not Hawaiian. That only refers to people who have like blood. But if you're from Hawaii, you're from Hawaii. But you're not like, it's not like California where you're Californian. You know what I mean? Like, you can't say that. I see that in news articles a lot. And they'll be talking about Obama, who's like half black, half white. And they'll be like, the Hawaiian, and I'll be like, no, he's from Hawaii.
Okay.
So, like, he's not Hawaiian. Like, it's not the same thing. Like, that term, like, yes.
That's great. That's a great, like,
People definitely need to, like, can't, like, if you're going to write an article about a place, like, I just at least know a little bit about it. Like, to that extent, you know? Like, I don't expect you to, like, be able to know every little thing in history, but, like, to that extent, like, you just have to know, you have to know stuff like that. And then I feel like, I mean, yeah, I know I'm, like, kind of controversial. I'm, like, it's hard for me because I get both sides. Like, I get it and I get the give and take, and I just feel like honestly, I feel like there needs to be more unity in the community. I think a lot of the like shaming people for not agreeing with you, for being like, how, like, why would you think like that? How dare you? Like it's just divisive. And there's no way for us to come to a solution as a community without working together and like basically instead of trying to shame other people, you can be like, okay, like not everything's so ultimate. It's not so black and white. It's not so cut and dry. It's not like an us and them, and there has to be a working together. Like, it's not just us and only us and everybody else just stay away over there. And, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right.
There has to be unity.
Yeah, it's so much more complex.
That's A'ohe hana nui ke alu ia. No task is too big when done together by all.
That's the inspirational quote.
Hana nui ke alu ia. A'ohe hana nui ke alu ia. Yeah.
Say that. What was that mean again one more time?
No task is too big when done together by all.
Yeah. And we'll just leave it at that. Period. Yeah. Thank you so much, Spencer. I appreciate you for being here. And yeah, guys, stay tuned for next week's episode. And don't forget to be you. Peace. Hey.